Pleasant good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, as I take the opportunity on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition and Political Leader of the United National Congress, the Honorable Kamla Persad-Bissessar, to welcome you to another Sunday morning press briefing on behalf, as I said, of our great party. But more importantly, this morning, myself and Senator Nakid, David Nakid, will focus on the evil that is the People's National Movement, headed by Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. At the end of the day, we will continue to highlight the issues that are impacting upon the people of Trinidad and Tobago in a very negative manner as it relates to their standard of living and quality of life. And this morning, Senator Nakid will focus on the state of affairs as it relates to children's homes in Trinidad and Tobago, and more importantly, the very important fact that the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, has had under his responsibility or his office the Ministry of Gender Affairs and Children's Affairs, and that also of the Children's Authority under his watch and portfolio for the last 7 years. And he will address the very important issue and critical issue of the findings of the Justice Judith Jones report and the incompetence and the unwillingness of this government to deal with that. So without further ado, I will now hand over the podium this morning to the very distinguished Senator David Nakid.
Thank you, MP Indar Singh. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, we welcome all the viewers to this virtual press conference, and a pleasant good morning to all of Trinidad and Tobago. It is not an especially pleasant morning for me, because I am faced with the reality of bringing to you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, the realities, the political reality of what is taking place within our country and within what I term a diabolical PNM government. We are pleased as a party with a resurgence of interest in bringing to justice the murderers, the rapists of Akil Chambers in an event that happened 24 to 25 years later. We are pleased with what's going on. But we know as a party that our efforts in highlighting what has taken place just recently as last year is not a political effort by our party. It is not. The narrative in the public domain has been diabolically diverted by this government from what is happening right under the nose of the public at this point in time. And that relates to the Judith Jones Task Force report. Now we open the papers today and all we are hearing about is the SABGA report. That is of interest to us and it should be to everyone. But what is more interesting and more relevant is that Judith Jones report that was laid in Parliament, actually laid in Parliament in April, nothing has been acted on it until now. A task force has been implemented to review a task force. 136 million assigned to that. While the Prime Minister of this country, who professes to be concerned about the children of this country, who has made outlandish statements that he did not remember anything about a SABGA report, while he was himself was involved in the cabinet at that time, in the parliament at that time, conveniently forgot that that report was there, distracted the public wholeheartedly by proclaiming to the acting commissioner of police, McDonald Jacobs, go and find that report. Act on it. While a report laid barely a month ago has not been acted on yet. A report that outlined 7 homes to be shut down. Nothing has been done. Why? We'll get into that later. That's the financial aspect of it. I am here, and the UNC is here to talk about the tragic deaths of Simeon Daniel and Antonio Francois that happened until recently in March 2021. March 2021. And forms the backdrop to why I was invited by Justice Judah Jones to be a witness in that task force report. I was invited. I submitted evidence. I submitted testimony to Judah Jones. That testimony made it into the report, but strangely enough, my name was not mentioned in that report. As a matter of fact, names were changed. Now, I had brought this to the attention of our political leader and our deputy political leader, Jolene John, who asked me to hold on that information, because they were very interested to see if the media would realize that something had gone wrong with that report. Because I have stated publicly that my information was in that report. I was tasked by the political leader and deputy political leader to investigate the case after those boys were killed in McShine Lands, Laventille. I went up to Laventille and spoke with people who were present. I went up to places that I will not mention in order to protect the people who gave information to me. I gave that testimony to Judah Jones. I described the people who, one of those boys who were brought to a big house, and this is his direct testimony. He was brought to a big house along with Simeon Daniel and Antonio Francois, to a big house and sexually abused by people within that house. Those 2 people were described by that boy. They were described, one as being stocky, fattish, with a short dreadlocks, and ugly. The next one described, well, in a colloquialism that I will not say here, but we can paraphrase it to say effeminate. I gave that information. I even advised the panel of Judah Jones and her 2 colleagues where they should look. It is not me to give that information or to investigate further. That is not for me to do. That is for Judah Jones and the task force to for us so to do as regards to that information that I gave. They glossed over it. Nothing was said. Why is that? And we have to call out if Judah Jones, who later became chairman of the Police Service Commission, one of the most maligned independent institutions we've had in recent history, why did she politicize her report by not including me at all? Or my testimony was included, but not including mention of me in that report. That is a direct politicization of that report. And that makes us wonder, where is this plot going? And I want the people of Trinidad and Tobago to understand what we've been saying all along. Something is evil about this. You want to tell us, people with rational minds, that all of a sudden the newspapers, who forgot conveniently the tragic case of Atil Chambers, do not remember the case of Simeon Daniel and Antonio Francois, killed recently as of last year? One of those boys said to his mother that he had been abused and that he would tell her the details when he saw her. Somehow, those 2 boys And listen to this, my people, my brothers and sisters. Those two boys on top of a house, and I saw that house. I was taken to that house in open space with other boys from the authority and other boys from the community were there. You want to tell me, you want to tell us that people dressed in police uniform, and I'm giving you information that was in the public domain, that was in the newspapers. People saw two men dressed in police uniforms come up to that group of boys on that roof, find out the identities, speak to those two boys, target those two boys, and kill those two boys and leave the others. And no one in the media asked why. Why two 15-year-old boys? Boys were targeted and assassinated. No one asked, no one delved, no one sought to see how we can find justice for these boys, but we are distracted by Rowley's rant about a Sabga report that he supposedly didn't see. Why were these two boys killed? Evidence is there. They said they were being abused. They had fights with the security guards, and the director, the ex-director of Nicola Harvey Mitchell, knew that. Well, why did they have fights with the security guards? According to them, or people who knew of their situation, these security guards were taking them to a big house where they were abused. No one delved into that. No one asked Director Nicola Harvey Mitchell anything. In the report of Judah Jones, she's barely mentioned. Nicola Harvey Mitchell is barely mentioned. But she's the one who brought me into this case. She's the one who called to Jamal Shabazz and indicated that she needed help to find those two boys. And she did not at that point in time call to the police. If she did, bring the recorded evidence that you called to the police. Bring that data that the police received a call, a complaint from you looking for those two boys between March 21st and the time they were killed, March 28th. We want to see that. Because according to our information, you called for someone else looking for those two boys because you knew those boys' lives were in danger, what was done to them and what they experienced. You barely made Nicola Harvey Mitchell director under whose jurisdiction? And under the jurisdiction of Ayanna Webster Roy and Prime Minister Pete Rowley. Barely made it into the report. Barely made it into the report. I didn't make it in the report at all. And you all talk about, we see so-called pundits talking about the UNC's attempt to turn this into a political game. No. I am the one who was sent by the PL and DPL to investigate the matter. Let Martin Daly tell us if all the years he has advocated for Akil Chambers publicly, did he one time go on and investigate the case on the ground for him? He or Noble Phillips? It's easy to go into panyards and clink your glasses and get pats on your back for advocating for Akil Chambers, but did you put your legal office at the disposal of the Chambers family? I spoke with the families. I spoke with people in Laventille. I spoke with people who the police were trying to say were implicated in the killing of those boys. I did all of that. That is why I spoke with some authority when I spoke with Judah Jones and her colleagues. If you found, Miss Judah Jones, that my evidence, my testimony was not credible, it was your duty to say so. And tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago why my testimony was not credible. It was not your duty to completely eliminate my name from that report. When you've done that, you've politicized the matter. When you've done that, you have made it very, very easy to distract what we know to be the fundamental issue at hand. One, Simeon Daniel and Antonio Francois were being abused. The question is, by who? I give testimony enough to Judah Jones for her to take that to the police and look into that. And maybe, just maybe, when we look for the killers of Simeon Daniel and Antonio Francois, we might find the killers of Akil Chambers. So we are not going to be distracted. We are not going to be distracted by the talking heads that the PNM put out to defend their position, by the talking heads and the media who seem to direct the narrative away from the Judah Jones Task Force report and the killing, the murders, not the killings, the murders. Somebody is killed if they walk along the street like Abongs, and that's killing. But when you go up on a rooftop with 7 boys, target 2 and assassinate them, you're going to tell me there's a killing? No, that is a murder. That is a murder. And although we are pleased, I repeat, we are pleased that people are now clamoring for justice for Akil Chambers, we also have to be wary of why that narrative is being taken down that road and not in the direction of the Judah Jones Task Force report. Because we maintain that it has more to do not only with the sexual abuse, the physical abuse, but why with a report that called for the closing of 7 homes, why would a report like that not be immediately actioned and those homes closed? But we have utterances from Ayanna Webster Roy, from Prime Minister Rowley, because, you know why? As we say in Trinidad, money running. And that is why I called since last year in the Senate for an audit of the Children's Authority. An audit, a financial audit into the Children's Authority. Because you cannot tell me 64 million yearly before last year. Last year the media review increased to 80 million. A 16 million increase. I remember it clearly. I spoke about it in the Senate. I questioned why with a 64 million allocation. When you do the math, $80,000 per child per year. This is famous. Even Rowley spoke about it. He said that is nothing. It could be more. It could be more if it was that once a state care, it could be more. His usual intellectually bankrupt statement. He said 80 million. So increase the 80 million, and what we have? The same conditions in the Children's Authority. Children not well clothed, not well fed, not well secured, obviously, because we had 5 children escaping, 2 later murdered. So my concern, and our concern as a party, well, if 80 million is allocated to the Children's Authority, and these are the conditions expressed in the Judah Jones Task Force report, where did that money go? No one seems to be paying attention to that. Where did that money go? If you tell me, okay, that money is parked up somewhere in an account, waiting to be, I tell you, okay, then we could get to work. But if that money is not there, where did that money go? Children eating stale bread and tea for breakfast, children begging for food because not enough, girls, young girls without sanitary napkins, the most despicable of conditions described. Those homes virtually putting our young children, boys and girls, in squalor. And no one outraged about that. No one outraged about these 2 15-year-old boys murdered to protect possibly people who, until now, as Robert Sabga would say, walk among us, inhabit high office. So we are not distracted as a party by Rowley's rant and his pretense to care about the children of this country. Keith Rowley has never shown any care for the children of this country. Show me where, one time, other than this recent expression of outrage, where he has shown a love, a compassion for the children of Trinidad and Tobago? If he did, let us know. You want to tell me somebody who has been in the bowels of the PNM, in the inner sanctum of the PNM from 1987, you didn't hear something? You didn't hear something what was going on? It has been described as a pedophile ring. We take no pleasure that internationally people sending me messages, is the PNM the pedophile national movement? We take no pleasure in that. And I say that with all honesty. But if we who profess, as I see, all the outrage about Akil Chambers, rightfully so, that we want to clean up this country, we want to bring justice for these people, then we must not lose sight of what is before us. And what is before us is the Judith Jones Task Force report. What is before us are the murders of those two boys, Semyon Daniel and Antonio Francois. What is before us is why hasn't the media gotten a hold of Nicola Harvey Mitchell and asked her the hard questions? Why hasn't the media until now, after I have said the backdrop, expressed the backdrop of what happened to me being called before, that task force report, that task force committee in October 2021? Why haven't they asked her, is Senator David Naked telling the truth? Is Senator David Naked fabricating a story? Why hasn't the media asked her? Judith Jones has to come. I myself want to know, how can two boys be murdered in such a vicious manner after complaining of abuse, and until now we follow, wittingly or unwittingly, as a nation, the narrative that this government would like us to follow? Then, when we look and see the questions asked by some of our journalists, and I refer to Alina Dudnat from Noop News, she was one of the few people who asked this minister, when he had the Minister of National Security at his media conference, she pointed a question directly at Assistant Commissioner of Police McDonald Jacobs. What is the follow-up to the Judith Jones Task Force report? Before the Commissioner of Police could answer, he was stopped by the Minister of National Security, who muttered to him, "Let me take that question." Minister of National Security, Fitzgerald Hines, what is your business with the investigations of the TTPS? That is not your remit. Maybe you are unaware, but that is not your remit. She asked him, and we have that video. We have that video. She asked, what are the follow-up, the investigations being done to the Judith Jones Task Force report? That is not your business, Minister Hines. It seems you do not know what is your job, or what falls under your job. If you do not know your job specifications, we can recommend quite a few people who can help you with that, Minister Hines. Other than that, keep quiet and let big people in the room advise us to what is going on. So McDonald Jacobs, you have answers for us in the public. You cannot say, as you further said, that there are no further updates. There were recommendations made. There were dire circumstances pointed out by that Judith Jones Task Force report, incomplete as it was. What is the update? Or are we going to wait another 25 years to question why Semyon Daniel and Antonio Francois did not receive justice? Are we going to allow, as alleged by Robert Sadger, pedophiles to walk among us in high office? And then come with this full outrage or wait until there's some reception at some state board to clink glasses and feel happy that we mention Akil Chambers in an article or two. No, what we want is real justice. What the United National Congress under Kamala Persad-Bissessar wants, what we want is real justice. We want things action now. We want to know not what are further updates, McDonald Jacobs. We want to know what are the steps being taken to not only investigate that report, but to bring the killers of those two young boys, 15-year-old boys, to justice. We do not want to wait another 25 years as a family, heart-wrenchingly described today, of Akil Chambers, are still waiting for closure. We as a public, we as a society of Trinidad and Tobago, we have to stop being so hypocritical with ourselves. You know, we talk about language and we talk about these things, but these are graphic things. These are gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching things that have happened, and we have allowed it to happen. Because there are people among us who know, and they can take that information. But everybody have something to get, everybody have a little eat of food, and we stay where we are. Yet still, we are the first ones to come out and pretend that we're trying to seek justice or trying to achieve justice for the poor and vulnerable. So, we have to be very circumspect as we move forward as a nation. Not only pose the hard questions that I posited today to the people who are involved in this Judith Jones Task Force report. That would be, first of all, Prime Minister Keith Rowley, the line minister directly responsible for Gender and Child Affairs with Ayanna Webster-Roy, but also Director Nicola Harvey-Mitchell. We have to be wary of the intermingling of operatives from the PNM. Because how can we depend on a acting commissioner of police who we know, who it has been admitted by the Prime Minister, who interfered in our merit list in order to select who he wants? How can we be sure that he will find for us the justice that we seek? All these intermingling of interests by this PNM government is what we should be concerned about, because evil stalks the land under this PNM government. Evil stalks the land. And I think once we recognize that the only way to combat this evil, the only way to combat this evil that stalks the land, is to demand proper accountability, to demand proper transparency, and to action what we need to do. Not talk about it. The time for talk done. We need to have people on the ground ready to go and make the sacrifice to bring justice, not only to Akil Chambers, but to Simeon Daniel, to Antonio Francois, and all the boys and girls who have been abused and misused at these homes, especially, as we know now, under this PNM government. And I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Senator Nakit, for putting the issues as we see it on behalf of the UNC from the point of view of the abuse of children throughout Trinidad and Tobago, whether it occurred in whatever year. We are in 2022, and we will ensure that there is transparency and accountability in and outside of the Parliament in holding the government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley to account for his incompetence and his inaction as it relates to the state of affairs at the Children's Authority, and also on the finding of Justice Judith Jones' report and what needs to be done in correcting the ills at this point in time. This morning I want to move on to the very serious and very critical issue of the state of industrial relations in Trinidad and Tobago. But more importantly, we must recognize that Trinidad and Tobago is in crisis, whether it is in the health sector, the education sector, crime as it relates to the number of murders and the state of the National Security Ministry, the Ministry of Works and Transports, and also local government seem to have collapsed because of the state of roads and bridges and landslips and so on. The economy is in shambles. There's unprecedented nepotism and corruption. And there's also a crisis of leadership as it relates to Dr. Keith Rowley and his inability to lead and transform Trinidad and Tobago over the last 7 years. There has been no innovation, there has been no creativity, there is absolutely no vision as it relates to transformation of Trinidad and Tobago, because Trinidad and Tobago, we are soon approaching the 24th of May, and this would have been, the 24th of May would have been the 12th anniversary of when the People's Partnership government was elected to office under Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar. And we must never forget that it was a period between 2010 and 2015 that saw unparalleled and unprecedented development and transformation as it relates to the standard of living and quality of life of all citizens of this country. And I say so because Trinidad and Tobago is in crisis. And what I have to say this morning must also be seen in a historical context. Because only last Saturday, I attended a book launch at Naparima College in San Fernando to be part of a ceremony where Dr. Burnsley Samaru wrote a book, Adrian Kola Rienzi, The Life and Times of an Indo-Caribbean Progressive. And on an annual basis and on the eve of Labor Day and so on, we will always laud the work of Adrian Kola Rienzi, known as Krishna Dev Narayan, and Chubal Raya Buzz Butler. And today, as a society, we must recollect, and the rank and file of the labor movement, the leadership of the labor movement must recollect what 1937 was about. It led to the legal recognition and registration of the Old Trinidad Sugar Estate and Factory Workers Trade Union and the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. And it provided the foundation for the modern day trade union movement in this country. Legal recognition, as I said, the right to strike, the right to engage in collective bargaining from a free, fair, and independent point of view. And this morning, on behalf of the leader of the opposition and all those who are members of our great party, I want to speak directly to all public servants, all workers of Trinidad and Tobago and their respective families, the working class, and more importantly, the people of this country. And I say so in the context of whether it is the PNM of the late Dr. Eric Williams, George Chambers, Patrick Manning, or Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. The PNM has never been on the side of the working class and on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and his Minister of Finance and his cabinet, but more importantly himself and his Minister of Finance, will go down in our political history as the great betrayer and the greatest Judases of all time in terms of how they have attempted to abuse, use, and betray the labor movement of this country. And you must never forget, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that what emerged over the last couple of days in terms of the labor movement continues to be deceived and stabbed in the back by the Rowley-led administration, as evidenced by the government's latest offering of 0% for the collective bargaining period 2014 to 2017 and 0% for 2019 to 2020 and 1% for 2018 to 2021 must be rejected from the tables of Massa Rowley and Massa Imbert. The labor movement, if they want to hold to the true principles of what Adrian Colarienzi and Uriah Butler stood for, they must reject the scraps from the tables of Massa Rowley and Massa Imbert. It will go down as the most disgraceful wage offering in the history of this country, and public officers must see it as disgraceful, disrespectful, disdainful, condescending, arrogant, deluded, and vastly distant from the economic realities facing workers and their families across this country. Because workers, the ordinary citizens of this country, have to grapple with runaway food prices, and they cannot escape this. The Central Statistical Office have clearly indicated that food prices between 2014 to 2021 have increased by 44%. The price of fuel have increased, in terms of fuel prices, have increased by over 300%. In fact, in today's Newsday, you will find an article where the president of the Public Services Association has indicated, Leroy Batiste, that to fill the tank from Scarborough to Charlottesville, which was $100 previously, will now cost $221. That is the reality, while they want to offer you 1%. And there has been a loss of steady income, the cost of living is spiraling, and the government wants to whip the working class further with the implementation of the property tax, which Massa Imbert has said to you will be implemented by the 31st of December 2021. And I want to take the opportunity, as I said, to speak directly to you all, because the UNC, the United National Congress, is a political party that is rooted in peace, bread, and justice, that struggle for people, that struggle for improving your quality of life and standard of living. And as I said, the Prime Minister, when he was the leader of the opposition, and that is why I will term him to be the great betrayer, and his Minister of Finance to be the great Judas. Because when he was the leader of the opposition, we must never forget that he signed a memorandum of understanding with the labor movement that promised job creation, diversification of the economy, and economic growth, and so on. And it was signed on the 27th of August, 2015. And what has been delivered, we must ask, what has been delivered to the labor movement and the working class in terms of what was enshrined in this memorandum of understanding? Not one thing has been delivered, and that is why I will tell you that you cannot trust the Prime Minister and his Minister of Finance, and in fact his entire government. And we must never forget also, we have to demonstrate this morning. The UNC has to call out this government for its shortcomings, for its lies, for its deception, for its continued abuse and unwarranted attack on the labor movement. You must recollect in and around July of 2020 when the Prime Minister stood on a platform in Marabella and told the nation that his government was not closing down Petrotrin. In fact, that famous line, if you had your head in the freezer, close the fridge door and I want you to listen. And he said, I repeat, the government was not closing down Petrotrin. What has happened? Every one of them, all of the workers were sent home, and that is why we are saying to the labor movement, you cannot trust this Prime Minister and his government. And in addition, when they closed down Petrotrin, they promised the OWTU and the OWTU's company, Patriotic Energies Limited, the refinery. In fact, I could recollect, I was sitting in the House of Representatives when the great Judas, the Minister of Finance, Colm Imbert, announced that Patriotic Energies Limited was identified as the preferred bidder. In fact, he was so gleeful, he was so ecstatic, he nearly fell off or fell over the table making this announcement when he said that let those who labor hold the reins of power. And he was ecstatic to say that the Oilfield Workers Trade Union was identified as the preferred bidder. Since then, the OWTU is still awaiting, and Patriotic Energies is still awaiting to become those who labor hold the reins of power from an economic point of view, distinguished citizens of the country. And again, the labor movement continues to be abused and used and violated in every form and fashion by the Prime Minister and his Minister of Finance. And I want to read an extract from the budget statement of 2020. And again, I was in the House when the Minister of Finance, in his glee, he nearly fell over the chair and table again in making this announcement, and it had to do with daily paid public servants. Madam Speaker, and I quote, presently when a daily paid worker in the public service retires, a lump sum of money is received, but no pension. This burning issue has been discussed ad infinitum by successive governments, including governments who purport to be inextricably linked to and part and parcel of the labor movement over the last 25 years with no result. This PNM government intends to solve this long outstanding problem once and for all. And he went on to say that this will be a contributory pension plan similar to the contributory health plan already in force for public sector workers. Further details of this measure will be given in the Finance Act in December of 2019, and the new pension plan for daily paid workers will take effect in 2020. We are in 2022. The mid-year review was presented by the Minister of Finance, but the Minister of Finance did not say anything about how much will be found to fund this daily paid contributory pension plan, whether there will be a management committee, who will be the service provider, and so on. And that is why we are saying that you cannot trust the great betrayer, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, and the great Judas, that is the Minister of Finance, Colm Imbert. And I want to again, you cannot trust this government where it comes to collective bargaining. It is never free, fair, and independent, because the Minister of Finance will want to tell you that it is, I cannot negotiate in the public. He said to my colleague in the Senate, when the media review was dealt with in terms of the debate. I will not fall into the trap of Senator Mark and utter pronouncements as it relates to the state of negotiations. But when the Public Services Association could, via free and fair collective bargaining, sign a collective agreement with the National Insurance Board for the period 2014 to 2016, and this was signed on the 20th of October 2020, under the administration of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, the Minister of Finance will interfere and descend directly into the collective bargaining process by ordering an investigation into how this agreement was realized. NIB is directly under his watch. And up till today, he promised the country a report into the state of this collective bargaining process. And we asked the question here this morning, why did the Minister of Finance directly seek to launch this investigation? It was bold-faced, out of place, and downright disrespectful, and in violation of the Industrial Relations Act and the National Insurance Board Act also. And we must never forget that when there was a collective agreement made between the management and workers as represented by their union, the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, the minister blamed the industrial court for awarding increases in salaries to NP workers when in fact this was not so. It took a business reporter to expose the minister's false claim and correct the record. It was in fact the management of NP that engaged the workers through the OWTU and used the collective bargaining process to come to this agreement. So this is a government that continues to interfere with the free and fair collective bargaining process. They want nothing to do with labor. They have had a track record of being anti-labor, anti-union, anti-worker from the days of the Industrial Stabilization Act since 1965, 1972 with the Industrial Relations Act, with Bloody Tuesday when oil and sugar workers and the workers of this country attempted to unify the working class. Eric Williams used the heavy hand of the state and mobilized the police and the army. Batons, trenches, dogs, police dogs were unleashed with a reign of terror in 1976. We must never forget Bloody Tuesday, my brothers and sisters of the working class. And then they want to tell you that they formed a national tripartite advisory council to engage matters affecting the labor movement and workers of national interest and impacting upon the welfare of the economy and the state of development of Trinidad and Tobago. We must never forget that the actions of this government led to the collapse of the National Tripartite Advisory Council on two occasions. One was when they made the decision that the tourism development company would be closed down and all the workers would be sent home. There was a recognized majority union, the Communication Workers Union. They did not have the cabinet, the Prime Minister, the National Tripartite Advisory Council did not have the decency to engage the recognized majority union and the Communication Workers Union. In fact, as soon as they took the decision, the then minister, Shamfa Kojo of roaming fame and We Are in Charge fame, rushed out of the cabinet meeting room and made a telephone call to the then president of the Communication Workers Union, Joseph Rami, which lasted 1 minute and 26 seconds, to tell the union that the government took a decision to send home all the employees of the Tourism Development Company. That is the respect they have for recognized majority unions in Trinidad and Tobago. And never forget, my brothers and sisters, that the PNM government promised you pandemic leave during the pandemic, when all frontline and medical workers and workers of this country, public servants, toiled, gave their blood, sweat and tears to the continued development of this country. And what did the government come up with? In addition to the promise of pandemic leave and a work from home policy which they have bungled, they came up with a quasi-zone safe policy. And in fact, this was the most unconstitutional, flagrant, obscene and sinister abuse of the Industrial Relations Act and the collective bargaining process. And they bullied you, they intimidated you, they told you that you would lose your jobs if you did not present your vaccination status to the public servants and heads of departments. They threatened you that you would be debarred from entry into your respective workplaces. That is what your government of Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley has done to you over the last 7 years. And in fact, also, he took the opportunity to describe labor leaders as dotish labor leaders in this country. And this is why we are saying to you this morning, you cannot give them a free pass. You cannot allow this government to go as they are going in terms of what they are doing to your quality of life and standard of living. You must never forget their callous approach, their insensitive approach, their lack of empathy when the families of Kazim Ali Jr., Faisal Kurban, Yusuf Henry and Rishi Nagesa with Christopher Budram was looking for decisive action and leadership coming out of Paria and Newman George and the Minister of Energy and Energy Affairs. Absolutely none. Up till today, there is no empathy. There is no direction from the Minister of Labour as it relates to the state of affairs at the Occupational Safety and Health Authority. We do not know when the investigation that has been launched by the OASH agency will be completed. We do not know even when the commission of the much touted Commission of Inquiry will start into this particular tragedy at Paria. We do not know how much money has been allocated, where the commission secretariat will be established and so on and housed. And yet you want to allow this government to go unchecked with their latest offer and undermining of the collective bargaining process. My brothers and sisters, I want to tell you here this morning that the great betrayer and the great Judas will not be the answer to your woes in terms of the state of the collective bargaining process. And that is why, under the leadership of Kamla Persad Bissessa, we want to tell you that the time has come for a revolution of minds and a revolution of the people to take to the streets of Trinidad and Tobago to push back this government is upon us. Because if this is not done, we will not be able to alter the course of history and this dictatorship that we have seen unleash in terms of their actions and their deception and their lies over the last 7 years. Because it is under the leadership of Kamla Persad Bissessa that we worked with the labor movement. We ensured that there was fair play, equity and justice in the context of that glorious struggle for peace bread and justice. We created 56,000 jobs. We settled 43 negotiations. We found $5 billion against the backdrop of an economic meltdown and an economic downturn, in a global economic meltdown which started in 2009. We found $5 billion in terms of dealing with the outstanding negotiations. We raised the minimum wage on 2 occasions. We found $1,000 to pay public officers for a special duty allowance. And we had the vision to understand the threats of our law enforcement agencies, of what they have to undergo in the line and fire of duty. And it was a Kamla Persad-Bissessar government that had the vision to come up with a payment of $1 million of compensation for all law enforcement officers who are killed in the line of duty, my brothers and sisters. And therefore, if we understand what is before us, the time is now to work with the United National Congress. The time is now for all trade unions, whether you are in Fighton, whether you are in JTAM, whether you are in the National Trade Union Center or outside of the fold of the National Trade Union Center, to understand what transpired in the recent media review. Because the Minister of Finance came to the Parliament only last Monday, and he sought unlimited time, speaking time, to seek an additional supplementation of $3 billion to spend. And the opposition, led by Kamla Persad-Bissessar and my colleagues in the Parliament, had to virtually quarrel. We had to virtually curse. We had to prize out the information. They were kicking and screaming. They did not want to be transparent. They did not want to account to the taxpayers of this country. Why did they seek to an additional $3 billion? The Minister of Finance, the great Judas, told you that the economy has rebounded. We are out of the slump, and Trinidad and Tobago is in for good times again. But he did not tell you about what was the level of allocation to, or how much money he has set aside to deal with the settlement of negotiation. But what he could have told you is that $100 million was allocated for the capitalization of a special purpose company named the Secondary Roads and Rehabilitation Company Limited, which will fall under the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government under Minister Faris Al-Rawi. And up till today, no board, no employees, and so on. And we do not know how this $100 million will be spent. Will it be used to politic? Will it be used to campaign for the impending local government elections and so on? Where will the head office of this company will be housed? Where will the secretariat be housed? Will it be further rentals, entitlements for families and financiers of cabinet ministers? These are the questions the Minister of Finance did not tell us, and this is why we are saying to all and sundry in the labor movement that the time is now, my brothers and sisters, to ensure that if you want to alter the course of history and change the most anti-union, anti-worker, anti-people government that has unleashed the worst form of brutality and brutalization on the labor movement, then you unite, organize, mobilize, and defend your collective bargaining interests embrace the United National Congress under the leadership of Kamla Persad-Bissessar and let us restore Trinidad and Tobago to the glory days of unparalleled precedented development and growth, economic growth and development as it relates to improving the standard of living and quality of life of the workers and the ordinary citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. We thank you here this morning for being part and parcel of this Sunday morning press conference, and we now invite members of the media to engage us with questions they may want to pose to us this morning. I thank you.
We have a few questions.
Yes.
Senator Naked, so far the former director of the Children's Authority, Nicola Harvey Mitchell, has yet to make any public statements with regards to the Justice Julia Jones report. Do you think that the police needs to maybe speak to her?
I mean, that's a no-brainer. I mean, you have the former director, Nicola Harvey Mitchell, who was there, and so much abuse has been recorded and documented. You would think that she's, other than the Prime Minister, Keith Rowley and Ayanna Webster Roy, she would be the first person to be called to account. Apparently, based on my investigation, when you look at her social media, it seems she never worked at the Children's Authority. There is no further record that she even was there at the Children's Authority, which is more than passing strange. So yes, the police not only need to speak with her, they need to speak with Prime Minister Rowley, they need to speak with Ayanna Webster Roy, the Minister of Gender and Child Affairs, and of course they need to speak with Nicola Harvey Mitchell immediately.
Okay. MP Narsingh, recently you said Mr. Imbut came to Parliament to seek additional funds of $3 billion, right? But he may say that this is really the recommendations of the chief personnel officer. How do you respond to that?
It is very clear that the chief personnel officer has no independence in this particular process. The records are there, whether it is the National Insurance Board, the National Petroleum Limited, and so on. The minister has directly descended into the collective bargaining process. There is no independence at the end of the day. And we are getting reports that from a political point of view, the minister wants to appear as the one who will settle these negotiations in relation to superseding, and he will push aside the CPO and then attempt to engage the unions directly and want to beat and thump his chest that it is the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister who settled these negotiations. And this is why we are saying in the UNC, there's a process, allow the process to take place. And if parties cannot agree, there are avenues, there's the industrial court and so on. But the Minister of Finance must not descend into the collective bargaining process. And this is what is at stake, and it has been clearly exemplified. He did this at NIB, he did this at NP. He has even attacked the independence and work of the president and judges at the industrial court and so on. Even when the president of the court made her pronouncement as it relates to there should be no forced vaccination in the workplace and so on, they attacked the integrity of the judges at the industrial court. And this is why we are saying that it is only when a government is dictatorial and arrogant they behave in such a manner. And that is why we are saying to the working class and the leadership of the respective union, unify to preserve the interest of collective bargaining.
Senator Naked, you said that you spoke about the boys being able to describe the individual that abused them. Are you aware if they were interviewed by police, or were they allowed to identify these men by way of a graphic artist or so on?
Well, obviously the boys were killed before any interviews were made. The boys escaped, absconded from the authority on the 21st of March and were subsequently killed on the 28th. They did have conversations by phone with their moms, with their mothers, and said that they would detail the abuse. So they obviously didn't have a chance, for some nefarious reason, to give their report to the police. So that information about that was described, and we have to be fearful and careful that we don't place people in danger, was one of the boys who was also taken to that big house, and was able to describe the perpetrators.
Okay, and this is the MP nursing. The 100 million for the road repair company is just short of 2.5 million per constituency. Have they engaged your constituency so far?
Well, again, we do not know how they came up with that $100 million. And as far as I can recollect, as I speak to you here today, I have received no communication from any Minister of Government stating or inviting myself as the Member of Parliament to make any submission in terms of road repairs in the constituency of Couva South. And everybody knows that the mother of all potholes is located in Camden and Couva, and there's a state of disrepair and collapse, infrastructural collapse throughout the road network, whether it is at the level of the Ministry of Works or the Ministry of Local Government. There seems to be more companies in terms of road repairs in relation to road rehabilitation, and it sends a very clear message to me that the Prime Minister and apparently the Cabinet has no confidence in Minister Rohan Sinanan and also the pure unit of the Ministry of Works and Transport and so on. Because why create another entity when you have the pure unit existing under the Ministry of Works and Transport? These are the questions that must be answered, and as I said, this $100 million in terms of capitalization, we do not know the board of directors, we do not know how many employees and so on, and we feel strongly that this is another clandestine, another surreptitious, another dictatorial action on the part of the Prime Minister to move around monies for political maneuvering and politicking. If there are no further questions, again, we want to take the opportunity to thank Trinidad and Tobago for once again engaging us in another Sunday morning press conference on behalf of the United National Congress. Tomorrow we will continue our political activities with the Monday Night Forum, and then on Thursday PNT Speaks, and we will continue to do our work in the Parliament and outside of the Parliament in furtherance of the people of Trinidad and Tobago.